Who is the most delusional person you've known? My cousin has insisted to my family that I get exorcised because I'm gay and autistic. She thinks that only the devil himself can corrupt someone to this extent. The only problems with her theory are that I am neither gay nor autistic, and she's the one touched by Satan. Guy at my college thought he was God's gift to women just because he worked out daily. He looked more like an albino Dwayne Johnson with curly hair. It was like Casper took steroids and started hitting on anything that moved. Met a guy in the psych ward with psychosis who believed he was a prophet. Really nice guy. I have a quote written by him: "Madness is not pure error, it is nature's dissatisfaction with genius." My grandmother was a nurse in a psych ward years ago, and she encountered a patient who was convinced he was the second coming of Jesus. He even talked like Jesus. She said, "If I hadn't known he was nuts, I might have believed him." I work in a small-town radio station. I've seen lots of rookies fresh out of broadcast school let the tiny amount of fame they get from being on a small-town radio station go to their head. This one guy came into work one day, madder than hell that small-town radio famous wasn't famous enough to get him out of a speeding ticket. Known personally? Has to be my grandmother, who would tell me to lower my voice because the Jews will hear you. Same woman who was furious when she asked her son to go and buy some Christmas lights for the shrubs outside the house, and he came home with some very pretty blue net lights. She screamed, at the top of her voice, "Blue is a Jew color." I don't even know what she was afraid of. Jewish people. She never articulated it. Edited to add, I wasn't even talking about Jewish people when she told me to keep my voice down. I was a little kid, I was probably talking about Sailor Moon or Pokemon or something. I spent the first 11 months of my army career with this one guy, who had absolutely no idea that everybody hated him. He had this horrible personality where he talked too loud, said F all the time, stole shit and ducked with people's stuff and just seemed kind of like an alien trying to mimic heterosexual male interactions, but the alien had only studied bad sports movies and war films. He was incredibly cringy. Guy was raised by a single mother that clearly allowed him to get away with anything, and in the 11 months I knew him, I never once heard him take responsibility for anything. An example, we'll call him PH for dialogue purposes. We're in the lunch line and he gets a big bowl of clam chowder soup. He spills a little over the side of the bowl and onto the tray, and we're like, "Ah, looks like you spilled a bit." Keep in mind, we saw him spill it. PH, "No. I didn't spill it." Me, "Who spilled it?" PH, F, "I don't fkin know, I guess someone fkin knocked me, and made the bowl spill." As said, he swore all the time. You know you swear too much when a bunch of army dudes think you swear too much. Yeah. Literally can't take responsibility for spilling a little bit of soup on a tray. As said, though, the most delusional aspect of his personality was his complete inability to accept that nobody liked him. When our final course, combat engineer training, finished and we were all about to get posted off to our respective units and bases across the country, he'd always talk about how he was going to hang with the people who were going the same place as him and maybe be roommates with one of them. To the man, each one of them never wanted to see him ever again. It took on average about 2 weeks from the point of meeting him to completely despise him, and he was never once aware of or willing to admit this. As said by one of our sergeants at the end of our course, at the course party, "That kid's a f***ing lunatic." Couldn't have said it better myself. My aunt, my mom's sister. She constantly stirs drama with other people and then calls you out for being mean to her. WTF lady. For example, one time I came outside and I see her pull up in her car. She starts chit-chatting to my mom. They're talking about her haircut. I tell my mom we needed to go and she drove away shortly after. Totally fine. I get a call from another relative a week later that she's angry with me, because the day she came over I rolled my eyes at her and she reads lips. She knows I said something about her. This didn't happen. She then continues to post on social media how karma is gonna get me, while simultaneously commenting on all of my stuff, saying how cute my daughter is. Delusion. My little sister. Me and my eldest sister were raised by an alcoholic mother, who left us with random people so she could get drunk. When I was about 6 my mom sobered up and had my little sister. The girl is delusional and has adopted the idea that she went through what me and my older sister went through. She recalls memories that never happened. She swears my mom beat her, never happened. She makes up stories, like she was a mortician, she traveled around the world, she dated such and had tons of money. It's so weird. She spends every waking moment on Facebook and posts every single thing that goes on in her life. She has a felony, she beat her baby daddy, until they broke up, and now both of those psychos have a really shitty custody fight going on. I could go on and on. My ex-boyfriend plays the victim to his friends and family. Yet I have spoken to 2 of his exes and we've all called the cops on him at some point. He obsesses and stalks and harasses. He tried to break into my app once after we broke up to apologize to me, and tried to convince my roommate I was unstable and making rash choices. We've been broken up 7 months now. I have a new BF. And he still sends me emails saying I'm being unreasonable. A dear friend of mine, very smart, capable woman otherwise, had her college paid for by her parents. One day she said to me, completely serious, "Sometimes I wish that I had student loans." I told her please feel free to cut me a $500 check every month, and she didn't have a lot to say about that. I also used to work with a real born on third base but thought she hit a triple kind of person. One year, I got royally screwed by taxes, because I didn't realize my employer was neglecting to take out some of the taxes they were supposed to, and I ended up owing $2,500 plus in taxes, which forced me to empty my savings to the point where I had $90 total in all my bank accounts. This woman looked me square in the eye and asked me, completely serious, "Why didn't you bring it to your accountant?" I grew up middle class, or maybe even upper middle class, but my parents never let me feel like I deserved it. The obliviousness of people who grew up with money is just infuriating to me. Like those people who unironically ask why don't they just get a better job? This dude who used to live near me. There is a laundry list of stories, but 2 gems are. When he took those fake $1 billion bills you get at Halloween from church groups to Walmart, filled 8 shopping carts with random expensive stuff, mostly electronics, and tried to buy them with the money. Or when, after the cops being called for him shooting our much younger neighbor with an airsoft gun, he grabbed a samurai sword, and charged at the cops. Spoiler alert, he got tased. He later told us if they shot at him he would cut the bullets in half like Ryan Reynolds did in X-Men Origins, Wolverine. My little sister who somehow got it into her head that we grew up in the ghetto, we didn't, and that it is okay to keep popping out kids with different baby daddies, because if God didn't want me to have babies, he wouldn't let me get pregnant. OMFG, I want to hit her in the face every time she says something like this. BTW, she is now pregnant with her 5th child, right after being a complete hypocrite. When she got pregnant last year and had an abortion because she wanted a girl, she is finally having her girl, so hopefully she stops. And before I get a bunch of angry messages, she lives off the government. Baby daddies do not support their kids, so she brags about being a hustler. SMDH. Perhaps not delusional, but she's certainly prone to flights of fancy, my mother. She's got some belief that rich Chinese princes are waiting for me at Harvard, that technical schools are no places for women, who want to marry well despite being a professor in a science, who attended a technical school for graduate study, and that there are some things that men are just better at than women. Like math, and writing, and cooking at fine restaurants. She also believes she's the best parent around, which I'll assure you, she's not. Definitely the cause of a real deep-seated self-hatred that stems from her constant, "Yes, as a child I was the most beautiful and most athletic and most intelligent in my class. Every boy wanted to date me. I don't know what's wrong with you." Or sometimes, "You must have too much of your father in you." Most of this comes from the fact that she thinks a woman's job is to find the best marriage, which she thinks she failed at as she has to work still. And for some reason the best marriage means marrying a man from a wealthy family with a nice liberal arts degree, otherwise you're a failure. She's also quite racist, but I'm a minority, there's no way I can be racist, she says as she yells at every poor driver for being Hispanic, mocks most languages that aren't Chinese, and insists that anyone who isn't East Asian or white has no business driving nice cars or wearing nice clothes, and if they do, wow, they really are breaking out of their place. And as many do, she doesn't believe in mental illness, so that kind of sucks. Because of course admitting to your mother in a fit of tears that you really did have a lot of suicidal thoughts is just a cry for attention, and a reason to keep you from seeing your friends for a while. Worked a night job where I met someone who was studying rather than going to school. Eventually I got out of him that he was studying to be a seducer. He studied Cleopatra, Rasputin, Casanova, etc. to learn the art of seduction. Basically this guy's life plan was to just seduce his way through life. He had an intricate plan on how he was going to seduce our supervisor for a raise, seduce multiple spouses to support him, even how to get free coffee by seducing the barista. He must have done a lot of seducing to keep working that barely over minimum wage night job for years. About 10 years ago I had a friend whose mother was extremely New Age Christian. She taught her kids that the Earth was only 12,000 years old, dinosaurs went extinct about 8,000 years ago, and that humans have only been around for about 3,000 years. Evil then sprung forth, so God created Jesus to rectify this. That in itself is quite common in New Age Christian thinking, I believe. However, here's where it gets interesting. She would often go into rants how she failed out of college due to arguing with her professors over the validity of carbon dating. I think she said that you can't just define carbon being a certain age and then apply it to all things. She also argued about knowing the age of the universe according to researching the Bible, rather than the lambda thing people currently use to identify it as 13.8 billion years old. I could be mistaken, my memory is foggy. I couldn't argue with her. Not that I agreed whatsoever, but have you ever tried to argue with someone that delusional? Edit. I had no idea all the different types of Christianity. I apologize for using the wrong terminology or offending anyone. I'm not as well versed in the proper areas, and I admit being agnostic I probably will never be. I did take a theology class on radical Catholicism that I thought very enlightening, and I recommend reading Come Out My People by Wes Howard Brooke to anyone interested. My brother was always bragging about how chicks he worked with wanted to F him. Then after 2 or 3 months, when he inevitably quit or got fired, whenever the guys were talking about chicks they hooked up with, he would always talk about these beautiful women that wanted him, which he just never got around to hooking up with. One time after starting a new job, he comes home all excited and yells, "Holy shit, the receptionist at this place is gorgeous, and guess what? She wants to fuck me." I said, "Dude, you've been there 1 day. How do you know she wants to F you?" So he says, "Well, I just walked through the front door, and as I was passing by, she looks me dead in the eye and says, 'Good morning.'" Guy knew who wanted me to quit my well-paying job, quit school to spend more time with him, to watch him sit on the couch all day, be a potato and play video games. He couldn't wrap his head around why I also refused to regularly attend comedy shows with him on Sunday or Monday nights. The reasons I wouldn't go: 1. He wouldn't ask me beforehand what my schedule was, just assumed I'd naturally want to go. He'd buy the tickets and apply the pressure. 2. I work. He did not. I'm also doing my MBA. 3. The shows were for the most terrible. Think open mic types with unpolished amateurs. That's right, he thought the world revolved around his schedule. Oh, and he was a narcissistic babbling logorrheic, who couldn't STF you when walking down the street. You know, the kind who has to point out every single thing he sees. From the dog passing by to the items in the window to crap on the curb. My father. The man does not live in the same reality as the rest of us. He is almost 60 and still thinks he's going to make it in the music business, despite the fact that he has no band and plays no gigs. He's a passable guitar player, but the typical guy that had a band in the 70s and early 80s. Takes himself way too seriously, as if he's some kind of prolific musician. He took some mediocre pictures of the band Genesis in the 80s and has called himself a photographer since then. He built himself and couple friends some very primitive websites and calls himself a web designer. He took as in one, class on sound engineering at the community college in like 1980, and he calls himself a sound engineer. He has a couple of video cameras and knows the basics of video editing, and now he bills himself as a videographer for local bands. The man just makes shit up to make himself seem important. He hasn't had an actual job in 13 years. He's been self-employed in that time. But you need to have actual clients and stuff. He thinks he's above everyone, the smartest guy in the room, and just this grand person. It's ridiculous. IDK how his wife puts up with it. Definitely my uncle. He claims to be the descendant of some wealthy noble family from Germany, and goes around genealogy websites adding himself and my grandmother to said family, claiming she's a princess. Not my dad though, he doesn't count. This is only the latest one. He also has pretended to be a priest and a diplomat at some point, as well as having several diseases, so he could get money, sympathy from people, and heavy prescription drugs, HIV, melanoma, Parkinson's. The list goes on. We tried having him admitted, but he always gets discharged a day or two later, since he's very good at convincing everyone he's fine, and that's us that want him out of the picture. A friend growing up kinda just started being a piece of shit as soon as we got out of high school. I was friends with both him and his girlfriend. It got to the point where he would tell her to walk to my house, after work instead of picking her up, because I was close by and he didn't want to drop what he was doing, usually getting high in another friend's basement. Then he physically assaulted her. I blew up at him, she wised up and moved on, and then he had the balls to actually post, "My friends and girlfriend abandoned me." I guess nice guys really do finish last after she left him. Never wanted to get physical with a former friend so far. Then when I was 18 to 21, I had a 40-year-old boss, who just so badly wanted to be one of us kids. Only he was also a creep, knew he was a creep, but blamed it on being Hispanic. How you are so self-aware while also fooling yourself and being a creep is beyond me.